Welcome to the Blueprint Podcast, where we throw out the old blueprint so you can become who you were always meant to be. I'm your host, Jason Smith. And if you haven't already, make sure you hit the subscribe button and share this podcast on social media and tag me in it at jbirdfit. Today we have Jenny Helms-Calvin, licensed clinical marriage and family therapist, esteemed coach, author of Beneath Your Bullshit, the founder of SOMA, the largest mental health practice in Kansas. She's not just a therapist, she's also a talented musician and your boundary bestie. Jenny, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah,
Vulnerability, what is your definition of that? What does that look like for you?
yeah. So when I think of vulnerability, I think of being brave. So it's interesting that you talk about it as a weakness, as protecting yourself, because for me, vulnerability is the way that we actually solve issues. It can be a solution too. And so I think so many of the issues that we have in communication and connection have to do with people not being able to be vulnerable or not being able to feel like they can share and be real. And I'll speak for myself, like a lot of my journey, if I'm looking back at like when I really have struggled with vulnerability, and not to sound like I feel like I just sound like Brene Brown, like rehashing it, but at least my experience,
Yeah.
I truly have associated it with shame. If I felt bad about something or if I was judging myself for having that fart or struggling with that thing, I really couldn't speak that to other people. And the more that I've been able to accept myself, to not struggle with perfectionism, to give myself permission to be human, then I've actually been able to share things and not let those things secretly have power over me. I think if I were to reframe it in the way that would resonate more so with probably like a male audience or first responders or things like that is how can we just get real and share what's true to us if we were to take away our fear, if we were to take away shame and the ways that we judge ourselves or our experiences, whether we realize we're doing that or not. The more that I've been able to just lean into stuff. And even it's funny, even in like my personal relationship, the more that I've been able to say, you know what, I do struggle with that. Most of the things that I've had to work on for myself or my own therapy journey and growth journey has been through acknowledging and facing myself, even though that is so much easier to say than to do. There's
Well,
so
it's that concept of the wounded healer.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I'm still a wounded healer. I'm still discovering things about myself that I don't always love. And that's hard, right? I think that's a big piece of why coaching, why therapy, why all of that even matters. And it's not just having wine with a friend or whatever that looks like. It's because we're actually in spaces where we have the ability to be challenged and truly look at parts of ourselves that we would not be able to otherwise. I even now, I feel like the more that I grow, sometimes I can be a bummer in my friend group because,
Well,
because well, even recently, I was in a friend group and one of the friends was talking about this experience she had. And obviously, I'm not trying to share her stuff with everybody else, but she was talking about this experience. And all of the other people were like, yeah, girl, yeah, that's the way to do it. Or like they were validating. And I was like,
right.
there's probably two sides to this story. In my head, I was like, I'm really curious how it was so extreme that I couldn't fully just validate it, if that makes sense, the view on it. And I
Well,
wanted to hold space and listen. I wasn't just gonna be like, "Yeah, your reality is real," 'cause it totally is for them, but I almost felt like it was also damaging to have an opinion of just, yes, and validating it versus just being like, "Oh, I hear you, that really sucks." Like, and just hold space for it versus I think what a lot of people will do is they just say the next comforting thing that's more comfortable.
yeah, because it's really hard, especially in your friend groups, right? Because you want to be supportive. You don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to dive into your stuff because, quite honestly, I don't have the emotional capacity to help you navigate all of that stuff. Their partner is friends with this other person. And you have to look at that experience and recognize that you become who you hang out with. And
Yes.
so when these things become a cycle, and we're looking at these relationships, so they go to each other and they tell each other all their deep, dark, dirty secrets, and these things get really tough. And they're saying all the things that each other wants to hear. And then they go home and there's this disconnect with their partner because, well, now you've already relieved that pressure valve that's inside of you. with this other person. And now you're not being vulnerable. You're not sharing with your partner. You're not showing up in that relationship. And you're actually creating distance and a massive gap between you. And that's really difficult for the other person that's in the relationship because they're looking at it like, what did I do wrong? What do I need to fix? And there's all these questions that start to rise up from that.
Absolutely. Yeah, we like the fancy therapist term that I think of is triangulation, right? Where instead of going to the person and addressing it with them, you go to somebody else and you share and again release that pressure. And it actually keeps people from creating change in their relational dynamic.
Right.
They release the pressure and they're like, I'm actually okay. That wasn't that bad. And then they have the same issues happen over and over again. And it can sound like if you're the friend, it can sound like the person that constantly comes to you and always has the same issue, like a little bit different details, but it's like the same dynamic over and over again. And you're just, and that's something where I encourage people to set boundaries of, hey, we could talk about stuff, but I'm not going to talk about this specific issue unless you've taken action, you've talked to that person, you've created some sort of change. Because I do recognize my role in just being your pressure relief valve and really just enabling you to stay stuck in that pattern.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not
No,
healthy at all.
no, it's not. And again, just the person on the other side of it, they're left wondering, and then their anxiety starts to rise up, and then they're trying to figure out the other person, and it creates this dynamic of that runner chaser. And that's not good for anybody because, again, we're never coming to a resolution of a problem, but we're creating a cycle that continues to perpetuate itself because we're afraid to communicate. If I tell you my truth, if I tell you how I feel, then you're going to leave me. You're going to abandon me. You're going to reject me. And then all of this ends anyway. And so it's really hard to reconcile all of that. So, what would you tell somebody that's in that runner chaser dynamic and they're just trying to get to this place where they can start to tell their truth to their partner?
Think they have to actually acknowledge that fear of abandonment and start there. Because when that fear is driving the bus, I think what happens for a lot of us, and myself included, I've really struggled. I luckily have both. As I've been healing in my journey, I've had, what is it, the mix of anxious avoidant because I just want to do it all. I just, yeah, want to have every experience. No, it is not fun. And that's been
Yeah,
part of my journey and my healing too.
it's
Like
very familiar.
exercising every part, but I know that in my own journey too, because I like to speak and share my own truth, and I'll add in like friends, clients, that sort of thing. But I think when we have that desire to, instead of addressing it and we're slowly distancing ourselves, it's that idea that we feel in control of that fear. If we're going to have a bad rejection in our relationship or feel like we're going to be left, if we feel like we can control it, that feels more comfortable than addressing that fear head on. And so to me, if a person is in that dynamic, I think the best thing would be let's first acknowledge your fear. Because we can't do anything about it if you're just like, no, they just suck. And you're like, is that really, yes, they might have their stuff too that is part of this dance, but
Yeah, that can be potentially true. They can just suck.
they
Yeah,
can. And both can be true, right? But
at the same time, yes.
how do we acknowledge that so that at least when we are creating the ways that we're going to boundaries or safety within that relationship, that we are doing it in a way that is coming from our best selves, not coming from our fear. Because we have to acknowledge that the patterns that don't serve us are coming from typically somewhere unhealthy, typically fears of abandonment, of not being worthy, rejection. And so I think the first thing is to acknowledge that fear so that we can know that we are in that dance of trying to control that journey because we're afraid of it.
This is where I tell people the importance of the self check-in. When you feel yourself becoming emotionally activated, what does that feel like? You get a little bit of an adrenaline dump. You might have that taste in your mouth, or your heart rate's raised up, your palms are sweaty. There's all these things that you might be experiencing at this time. If you can begin to identify that and recognize that, oh, okay, I'm triggered in this moment. Great. What's happening right now? What am I experiencing? Who am I with? What's going on? What words can I give this situation right now? And you can break out your notes app on your phone and start messaging all of that out, or grab a notebook and write these things out so you can begin to identify, this is what causes me to be in this spot. And then we can start to navigate it a little bit differently with the other person. And it might be as simple as, hey, timeout, I need 10 minutes or 24 hours, depending on how activated you actually are.
Yeah. And noticing if there's like those themes, right? I love that idea. For me, it's my phone app. Like I'll take out my phone app and I have a note for myself that I will track those things when I'm feeling some of the like major themes are like if I feel frustrated, whatever you want to call triggered,
Yeah.
frustrated.
You read a comment online and you're just like, no, I don't like that.
You know, it's funny. That is not there. Trust me, I have a long list of my own triggers. That is not one of them. There's certain things I'm like, I don't know why that doesn't bother me. That probably should. But yeah, no, comments are like when people are like mean to me online, I'm like, cute. I don't know. Like,
Right. Well, it's automatic. So, hey, man, like that's your stuff. That
yeah.
actually has nothing to do with this.
Yeah. And it's still, I guess maybe that goes on the it just still amazes me that people put energy into that. Like of all the things you could be doing in your day, you are hating on somebody and like making that known to the world and like having your opinion out there. I don't I just to me, I'm like, there's like so many better things to
So this is what I do. And if you guys have ever received this message, then you know it's you. But I always say, hey, you must be new here. Thanks for being a part of the Blueprint community. You should check out this podcast number, episode, whatever. I think you'll get a lot of value from it. And I leave it at that because clearly they're going through something. I'm just the person that they're putting this on top of in this moment. Do I get everything right? I don't. And I don't have a problem admitting that, hey, maybe what I said doesn't resonate with everybody. And that's totally fine. But it comes from a place of you can't get here without going through some stuff. So there's definitely some personal experiences that get mixed in with the things that I'm saying. And a lot of my stuff, people are like, get out of my head. I can't stop watching me because they're like, you're literally living my life. And it's no, I've lived pieces. I've had experiences and I've seen it out on the job in the real world. And so I know what these things look like at different levels in society. So yeah, there is an understanding there and it might not resonate with you. And that's okay. Check out the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think that everybody's going to connect with every like coach, therapist,
No,
influencer, whatever you want to call people. And
and you
that's
shouldn't. Be
okay.
skeptical. Yeah.
That's part of it. And I'm grateful, like, for instance, I'm grateful for you because I know that I tend to connect more with a female audience. And I'm going to share, like, this was what was really unfortunate. I remember I ran ads and I was like, oh man, I really want to resonate with men because I actually, in my therapy practice, I see a lot of men.
Right.
For me, I was like, oh, I can totally resonate with men. However, unfortunately, when I put stuff out there and like had this thing that was also targeting men, I got bombarded with messages about what I look like, trying to like sketchy messages. And that was the unfortunate part where I was like, I feel like I'm hitting a wall. I feel like I'm hitting a wall and being
Yeah.
able to connect with people and just being able to accept that. Not that I like that. I'm still bummed about it. I still would like to.
Well, it can get you to a point where you don't wanna create content. You're just like, "Whatever, I'm
Yes,
over it."
yes, that's all that I am, is what I look like. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have no,
So that's the value you got here.
that's,
Awesome.
you know, and I'm like, and I'm also not going to change who I am to try to appeal to people
No.
either. And it's just, it's weird. You're gonna resonate with certain people and then not others, and that's part of it. Sometimes I curse, and so if somebody's really uptight about that, that's okay. And I'd say I uptight is probably not the right word. That's probably even me being judgmental there. I came from an LDS background, so I have a lot of people in my life who don't curse and just have different views. And I don't know, it's cool. Like it doesn't resonate. Like that's okay. It's gonna feel like connect with the people that it's supposed to.
So I think in TikTok speak, so whenever somebody says, "Yeah, I curse," "Oh, I cuss a little." It's just like,
It's
yeah, I can't help it. What did that sound in my head? It's burned into my brain, and I don't want it there, but it's there. That's really hard when you start getting all those different comments, and I think it comes in stages because most of my platforms have grown this year. So in January of this year, I had 129 followers on Facebook, and that's now shifted to 109,000 on Facebook. And that's been the same or similar trend on all the platforms. And it's so at each stage of that, the 100 to 1,000 people are just like, what are you doing? You're an idiot. I know who you are. And like people come out of the woodwork to tell you, like, you're an idiot. And then you start branching out a little bit more. You get 10,000, 20,000. Now people start to take it a little more serious, but now you're getting all this hate. And then over like that 50, 60, 70,000 range, now the comments that come in are, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing. I've learned so much here." There's all these benefits that are coming from the content, and so that some of that judgment has now been dismissed or muted because there's so many good comments that are coming in and just people sharing their experiences. And they do on Facebook, man, that's really the platform right now. They just pages and pages, and it's I love the vulnerability. I love that you're putting all that out there. I can't read all those.
Then,
Yeah.
yeah, I've also experienced that. And it's amazing how much people will share to you online
Uh,
about their lives. And that also to me speaks to just how much they're wanting that, but for whatever reason, like they don't feel like they can do that in their real life. Like how much they're needing, wanting that, and for whatever reason, online feel safer.
let's explore that for a second. Why do you think that is? Why does online feel I don't even know if it's necessarily safer, but it's is it just because we're not really connected to it? Like,
Mm,
I get to go live my real life, and this is just happening here on this platform that, nobody sees.
it's a fake life because I'm trying to actually give this a little bit of thought more just than oh yeah, obviously you're less connected when you're not physically there in the space with someone else. I almost wonder people with complex PTSD or severe PTSD will do these things where it's, and I don't want to generalize this because I think all of us, when we are struggling with something, can have what we call part. And I'm not necessarily talking about dissociative identity disorder. I think people get confused. I just mean that compartmentalizing it or putting it into the protector part is something that our brain does. And so part of me wonders when you're talking about this like other online world, if it is part of that compartmentalization process that our brain naturally does. Like it just goes along with our psychology that it makes sense that we're, it's not really me, it's online me, right? And
Right.
that kind of feels like that action of compartmentalizing it makes it easier for us to cope with that thing or
Yeah,
easier for us to share that thing.
I
So I
can see
wonder if
that.
it's our modern day version of
Yeah, because we user 8675309 on whatever platform and,
oh my God, username.
I know.
Call
And
me
so
out
I
like
I yeah. I can say whatever I want. I can be whoever I want. I can step into this place, and there's a certain amount of emotional freedom that comes with the anonymity of not using your real name and being able to get out there and express yourself. That in real life, if you attempted to express yourself, you would potentially get knocked down or rejected or abandoned or told that you're foolish or all the things that you potentially think about yourself that are negative. It's going to be given to you in real life. But if I just go over here, then I can express myself in ways that I don't get to in the real world, and that feels good to be able to get that out. It's almost like an emotional release.
yeah. I definitely think it's an emotional release. I'm curious, I guess at some point people trust that they won't get rejected. I'm wondering with that process, I get they're choosing where they release, right? And so
Yeah.
something about that space, they feel like it's less risky. Like there's less of a chance that they'll be rejected or ridiculed or
No, I
yeah.
do. So I saw this meme today, and it was a picture of this guy, the face is, like it's got red all over it, so you can't see the face, and then it's got, like, text underneath of that where somebody wrote a message, "Hey, you're short," right? And or, "You don't look tall," something along those lines, and then the next message was, "What, you're not gonna argue with me?" Because the other person just hearted it like, "Oh, thank you. Yes, I'm short." And then there's no argument, and it's now you're not feeding that little monster that's inside of me that wants that attention or whatever it is that you're seeking in that moment by saying something negative to somebody or negging them and or baiting them into something. What are you getting from that experience besides
Yeah.
a dopamine hit?
Yeah. A dopamine hit, a reflection of, again, I think for some people, it's the way that they feel in control of
Um,
to be able to even predict or to do things in which they will be rejected or ridiculed or yeah, it's interesting. That's its own like
yeah.
we can go off on a whole
No, we
trailhead.
absolutely could, for
But
sure.
I'm curious for you too, like, and maybe you've already shared this a million times, but like, given your background, what kind of made you want to talk about attachment and get, dare I say, vulnerable or real with people online? Because I feel like, yeah. I don't know. Like, I feel like that would maybe not, like you said, like it wasn't really the coolest thing at first when you don't have any, like when you're like, I have 3 followers and one's my mom. What kind of like motivated you when you were in that?
It's so interesting. I had actually taken a break from social media, and we really couldn't have social media to begin with. It was extremely limited to my home gym and just a few other things. And so I had gotten off social media and took a detox, which I highly encourage people to do. If you've never spent 6 months off of socials, it's a really good feeling and perspective to know that I can quit anytime I want and walk away from that. But as you go through, like I said, as being a first responder, you get exposed to so many different things and experiences. And some of these things are related to your own past experiences and they can be triggering for you in the moment. And of course, you don't know that's what you're experiencing. You just think like you're in a heightened sense of arousal. That's why when you said earlier to get real, right? I think getting real, that level of awareness is so difficult to achieve because you're in that sympathetic nervous system all the time. It's all the
Mhm.
time, like, you're never out of it, it's very rare, and when people do try to achieve that, they will find it through, hopefully, working out, CrossFit, that's a really jujitsu, that like, those are really good things to do, but all too often, it's turning to food and turning to substances and turning to social media and turning to your phone and just being dead set on that, and all the while, you're ignoring life is, like, passing you by, the people that are closest to you are just in orbit of you, and I heard this the best explanation I heard was Killian yesterday, where he was explaining that all of you guys are in this other room, and I'm standing in the hallway watching you. And so that's what it can feel like when it goes too far, when you haven't been going to therapy or doing any of the inner work or diving into self awareness and trying to figure out where are these things coming from? Why do I feel the way that I feel? And that's unfortunate for first responders that they're so underserved in that community from a mental health standpoint that it's really left up to you to figure that out, to know that when you should go to talk to somebody about something. And that can look very different for everybody because what activates me isn't going to activate you. And
Mhm.
someone else might see it as not a big deal depending on what our emotional capacity is for that type of experience or the tools that we have for resilience overall to navigate difficult situations. Getting real can be a really hard place to reach when you're so far away from what's real. Like I said, that world is very different. It's a different experience and they separate themselves and see themselves a little bit differently than everybody else. I can't tell you if I shared something I can with you, right? But there's
Mhm.
other things that I could share with other people and they'd be like, I don't know what to do with that. I can't carry that. You're giving me something I've never heard before. I don't know how to deal with this. I've never seen this. I don't know what you're going through. I don't even know if I can give you empathy on like I a little bit, yeah, but people don't know what to do with it when you give it to them because they haven't experienced it and they don't know what it looks like and they don't know what it smells like and they don't know what it feels like in the body to have some of these experiences. That's a lot of stuff to take in, but I think that's where we're at, and if that's why I say if you can recognize when you're emotionally activated, if you can begin to acknowledge that and then dive into your notes app or whatever it is for you, a little notebook that you carry with you and begin to figure those out, you can pull yourself out of whatever darkness that you've settled into. And that's me anecdotally from personal experience. I had to figure that out on my own. And I did, and I'm glad that I did but it also started I started leaning into things like Joe Dispenza, spirituality. That takes you down a whole rabbit hole. There's all these different rabbit holes to get into. You spend years diving into that stuff and it comes full circle again. And you're just like, yeah, there's something with meditation and journaling and going for walks and working out regularly and not drinking. Being sober is one of the best things that I've done for myself. You sleep every night. You wake up at 4 in the morning to go on your walk, on your ruck, and your life is just very different. It's very full, it's very vibrant. And that is the best gift that you can possibly give to yourself.
Yeah. That's awesome. I feel like there's so many different pieces of and we or like things I could probably be like, oh, about that would
Yeah.
trail off with you. But I just first want to appreciate that. Yeah, that journey I'm sure was not easy, especially if you're in an environment of people that are also unaware, if that makes sense. If everybody's like the whole community of people that you're around are not aware, it's so hard to get into that. And not only that, part of it, for my understanding, and maybe you could speak if it was different for you, but if you're so stuck in like that nervous system, like you're always on high alert, and then eventually it actually goes into like numbness. So that's actually the worst part of when you're in that
Yeah.
freeze state, but you're constantly in it and you don't know that you're in it. And the hardest part, I think, about healing that is typically to get back into where you have that safety, like that feeling of safety in your nervous system. You have to go through the flight part and the fight part, which is usually comes out as anxiety, anger, all these feelings that people are like, I don't want to freaking feel that. And so when they when they're healing, it actually feels really crappy. Like I don't want to, I was better in freeze mode than actually feeling, having all this stuff come up that at the time when you're healing, you don't know what to do with it.
Yeah,
Right.
I don't wanna feel stuff. Like, I was good not feeling stuff. That was great.
That was wonderful. And
Yeah.
yeah, no, and that's been, I feel like the dance I see people into it. And I get that. Like it's freaking hard, especially at first when you don't have the tools yet. And all you're holding on is lifeline of this is the right way. And you're like, this feels terrible. Because a lot of people think if I'm healing, if I'm getting better, I'm gonna feel great. And I feel like I end up being the bearer of bad news of it's gonna suck before it gets.
Yes. There's all this judgment that comes in and these expectations that we force upon ourselves that there's this ultimate destination that I have to get to because if I don't get to it, then I'm a failure. And so if I'm going to embark on this journey of self-awareness and therapy and try to figure all this stuff out, then it has to happen. What's the time frame? Therapist, is it a 1 month, 3 months, 6 months? How long is it going to take until I'm healed and I can run around telling everybody on the internet that I'm healed? It's not healed, it's healing. We're always in a state of becoming. And once you latch on to that idea that you're always in a state of becoming, but what you become is always up to you. And that's the work, right? That's why we take it slow. We slow things down. We go to therapy. We listen to our therapist. That's always helpful. But yeah, it's really hard to get through that when you have this massive expectation on yourself and then you feel like a failure because it didn't happen in a time frame that you wanted it to.
And I think a lot of folks don't realize they don't even really understand what complex PTSD is. They don't understand. And it's interesting. I wonder if too people feel like they are somehow like a failure or inadequate if trauma does impact them. Because you were talking about how it impacts people differently. And I said, yes, but we all have our different like flavors of it. So like
Right.
if there is not impacting you, that doesn't mean that it doesn't impact somebody else in a certain way. And even if it doesn't, you never know, like, the more that I've learned about what they call interpersonal neurobiology, which is fancy over the top language for like the way that our brain develops within relationships. So people always think about our brain developing and they're like, oh, we have genes and we just grow up and it's just going to be what it is. I think that's a very simplified version of what a lot of people think, but they don't realize that our brain not only develops based on the genetics and what we're born with, but also it literally develops or does not develop depending on the experiences that we have as a super little person, like
Right.
0 to 2, the most pivotal ages. And so you can't even remember the things that you did or didn't get in certain ways.
Yeah, it's what you experience and what you don't experience.
Don't experience emotionally. And so,
Yeah.
and people don't, they're like, oh, whatever, that's not that important. I'm like, that's super
Yeah.
important. So if you're
Yeah.
like, this person has this emotional skill, I'd be like, yeah, from 0 to 2, they were experiencing that emotional skill and had those resources, and maybe you didn't, and you had no control over that. Right. So if you're comparing yourself to that and judging yourself, like that's super unfair. It's so one of the most, I think what was eye opening for me was the metaphor was I didn't realize this. If a person is not exposed to light from a certain like pivotal age period, they will not develop sight. So they'll be blind. They'll have everything in their genes to be able to see. But if they are not exposed to light for a certain critical period when they're a baby, they'll be blind. And so
It's
to
wild.
me, yes. And I was like, how many different ways do we not realize that applies to the emotional world? And
Mm.
we judge ourselves. And we're like, "Oh, I'm blind." And it's, "Duh, you didn't have light." Like, this person had light and you didn't. And so I think to me, that was, like, very eye-opening to learn about that. So then I feel like, hopefully for most of us, like, we're never gonna fully know what we experienced or didn't. but to just have grace with ourselves that there are things that we are still healing from childhood that we did or didn't get. And I also think that happened in really great families where people just didn't know any better, or you just don't know the types of experiences that you had, or let's just be real, parents are human. I like joke with the parents I work with. I'm like, I do all this work about learning this. I care so deeply. I don't have kids, but in my future kids, I'm going to traumatize them. I know that. In like
Right.
subtle, big ways, I'm still going to do it as much as I care deeply and try not to. It's going to happen. And just to be able to say, that's okay. Like, it's
Yes.
part of this process. We just have to be able to like see that and be real. That's being human.
And there's going to be people that chime in and say, no, absolutely not. It's relax, guys. I love that you called it a skill because there's just skills that we didn't learn. They weren't
Mhm.
modeled to us. We didn't experience them. We didn't go through it. There was nobody in your teenage years that sat you down and said, hey, this is what emotional regulation looks like. You can actually do a physiological sigh and it's going to help calm you down and bring you from your sympathetic nervous system into your parasympathetic. Nobody told you that.
Yeah.
Like, we're learning this at 30, 40, 50 years. I have people that are 70 that have joined. I'm not laughing. It's wild to me that I would connect with people there. But I love that they joined the 21 day self love challenge and they share their experiences with us. And they're like, I'm still growing. I'm still developing. And I'm like, yes, you are. That is awesome. I love hearing that stuff because we often write off our parents and our elders as being, you can't connect with them. It's never going to happen. And it's not for everybody. Sometimes people wake up when they're supposed to. They get introduced to information when they're supposed to. I look back on it all the time and I'm like, man, I wish YouTube was around 10 years ago, 15 years. Like it was, but it wasn't in my experience with what I was going through at that time. And the content didn't exist that exists today that helps you wake up and navigate different situations. Like you're very much unaware, roaming through life, doing your thing as you know how to do it. And it becomes that pattern. You get introduced to things when you're supposed to.
Yeah. And we can still develop and grow. Like Dan Siegel has proven that people in their 70s can still make leaps and bounds of progress in their emotional development. So, yeah.
And physically, I've seen people online that if they start weightlifting in their 60s and it's just, oh, that's awesome.
No, it's so badass. And I still to this day, I have friends that have shared that like along because they do work out and they lift weight and they've had doctors, I think again, with intention. I don't think they're trying to be like, oh, don't move. But anytime they get any injury, they're like, you should really consider slowing down or not.
That always the answer.
It's insanity. And I'm like, that is actually terrible because what they are doing, it makes them so much healthier and alive and energetic. And yeah, it's been bizarre, but they've all been like, yeah, that's terrible advice. But just the fact that's so that's
Right.
still circulated, it's just, yeah, it's silly. And it's actually the fact that we stop moving that makes the like last bit of our lives like that low quality bit of life. I hope I'm like, older and I'm like going for like a little power walk and then I like keel over at the power walk, right? Like I don't want to be like, I'm like, what can I do? Like
Right.
versus the limiting belief of just stop, just be in your chair, just get ready.
It's so interesting when people tell you that too. So it's you get injured. I had shoulder surgery, and people tell you, "Oh man, slow down. You can't do this. You can't do that. You're not going to be able to do this again." And I'm just like, watch me. It's like I was a gymnast and a wrestler in high school. It's like there's just activity is a part of life. And so it's something that I want to continue to do well into old age. And God willing, I'm going to be able to do that. But you have to do it every day. You got to do it consistently. And it's really great for you overall just because you're giving it's what we call self-love, right? That self-like. I like myself enough to do this one thing consistently enough that is I know is good for me and it's going to help me in older age to be stronger, more capable, and enjoying more time with my family, hopefully.
100%. It's funny we talk about that topic because I was just talking about it with a client this morning who is in their 60s
Mhm.
and they were connecting those dots that it was a part of them not prioritizing themselves, that they
Yeah.
weren't getting to the gym, and they were just like, "Yeah, that's I can make time for all the other things, and then it's not I can't make time for me. I can't." And there's some deeper stuff involved with it, but essentially at the end of the day, they realized how much that was related to that they always are thinking about other people first and not really considering themselves.
How can you begin to make yourself a priority?
I think you have to figure out when you stop. I think it sucks, but like sometimes it is. And here's the thing. Some people they're forward looking and that works and that's the solution for them. I found that for a lot of people that when they are able to understand why that pattern started in the first place or where that may have came from, that just starts to give them some like ability to separate themselves and develop that hard to explain, but that differentiation where they're able to say, that's actually not what I believe anymore. That's not actually me. And
So
how do
I
I grieve that too? Because part of it too is grieving. I've lived
Yeah.
so many years with this way of doing something. And I've got to grieve it. I've got to forgive myself. I've got to be willing to say that's just not me anymore. And how do I start taking steps to live into like my true self? But you got to get real with yourself and realize it's not freaking you. That's
Yeah.
not what you want.
I always tell people it's a little FU energy. You gotta get to this place where it's, "Yeah, you know what? No, that's not me, not anymore. I've grown, I've evolved, I've changed, I'm recognizing things, I've created awareness, I'm stronger, I'm more capable." And there's, like, this shift in the way that you think about yourself and the words that you use with yourself, but also how you introduce yourself to other people. So, we stop using self-deprecating humor, and we start using words that align with who I've become. No, I'm strong, I'm capable, I'm kind, I'm generous, I'm loving, I'm all of these amazing things. And we start to push away some of the other stuff that is no longer serving us.
Yeah. And develop the capacity to be okay with other people not
Yes.
being the new us
Right.
and the ways that the new us is no longer serving them. That's a big, that is so huge, I think, for a lot of my clients. I've seen how much it is so hard at first for them to have that friction in their relationships and to have people be upset with them and not like the new person. And even I'm a marriage and family therapist as well. And so I trained in systems theory. And one of the things we talk about is how um, families will fight to keep things the same, even if it's unhealthy. And it's really interesting. I've seen that happen so many times that as people are healing, the people that genuinely are like they're close to you and their family and their friends will actually fight to keep things the same, even if it's not good for them. And it's part of that process is developing that ability to tolerate people not being happy with that change, people having friction and not agreeing with it. And so
So
that's part of that journey.
I heard on a podcast because I listen, that's all I do is listen to other people's podcasts. But it was Jen Sincero, author of You Are a Badass. And she said that you're actually killing off the person that everybody you know loves. And so they have a really hard time reconciling that in their own mind because they have a picture, they have an image of who you are to them. It's not who you are, but it's who you are to them and what you get from them and the experience they have of you. And when you begin to change, there's this dissonance that occurs because now I don't know who you are. I don't know what to make of you. So they end up actually exiting your life in some way, shape, or form, or you spend less time together because you're not connecting on the same level. And I just call that raising your vibration, right? Because you're growing, you're developing. It's okay. You shouldn't feel guilty for that, but just recognizing that not everybody's going to come along with you on that journey.
Yeah, 100%. And that can be, it can be a really hard place when you're first making those changes and you haven't met the people that you're quite like vibrating with yet.
God, it's brutal.
Some rep, or even like it was, there's a quote and it was really good. I was like, if you're on your way and like, you're not quite at the vibrant, like the vibrating where other people that are healthier are also going to be attracted to you and want to be your friend and things like that. But you're also like in that awkward space of I'm outgrowing my old self. And like, you're just like in no man's land of not good enough for the people that have done the self development. I'm not great enough for the people that I'm trying to heal and grow from. And I was like, it's so true. I think
Yeah.
people can relate. And I don't know if like good enough is a great way of describing it, but I just think of levels of emotional maturity, differentiation, whatever we want to call it. But it is tough. I know even in my own journey as I've worked on stuff and people, again, they'll fight to keep you the same. So they might even use things that they know that would really hurt your feelings. So for me, I'm happy to share this. I don't like being perceived as a person who is intentionally trying to hurt people or is a bad person. And so if I'm like trying to heal and someone's like, you're just an asshole or you're selfish or what, like those are the ways that I'm like, oh my gosh, am I? Like, and then I'll retreat back into doing the thing I really need to heal
Uh-huh.
from. So I've noticed that pattern even in myself that like sometimes it's really hard too because the people that are close to you also know the things that they can say get you back to doing what you were doing. And so I
Right.
know that's one of mine. So I've had to like really work on letting it go and being like, you know what? People can think I'm a bad person. That's okay. Like people can think I'm trying to hurt them or they can think that. And I have to be okay with that. I have to let that go and not try to control it.
So is there an exercise that you can tie into that, that someone can do?
I'm like, I'm sure there is, but like off the top of my head, for me, it's a lot of that self talk and
Right.
knowing like first awareness. And that's something that I've had to really work on in my own like therapy journey with my therapist, but also I will do that self-talk in that moment too of like when I notice I'm getting triggered, I'm like, what is this related to? Is this you trying to be seen as somebody who's always nice and cares about people? Or like it's really that
Right.
self-talk and like just getting curious, like not in a mean way, but just in a, what is this really about? Because you're not living into the way that you're wanting to. There's something internally that's friction. And that's usually when I'm able to be aware of that like protector part of me that like wants to be perceived as like always being nice and always doing things with good intention and whatever we want to call it. But I think when I acknowledge that within myself, like I'm actually able to step back and be like, okay, no, I've got to do this thing anyway. And for me, I would tell myself like I get like permission to not always be a nice person,
Right.
permission to be perceived as a mean person, and that's okay. Because I don't know why I put those expectations on myself anyway.
It really comes down to, can I assert myself? And this is something that I've been challenged with, is actually that no, yeah, my opinion does matter. I do have things to say, and that's been the evolution of my content and a little bit of validation there as things continue to grow. In that I've formulated opinions. It's okay to have these opinions, and it's also okay to share these opinions. And then to have it acknowledged by other people, you start to find that other people come in and they identify with that. And now this has been a source of me doing a little bit of healing work around my opinion does matter. And I don't have to retreat. I don't have to pull back. I can assert myself and feel confident. I do that like it's a little barrier, right? It's that wall internally that I tell myself is okay to have, that I can assert myself and be this person. And that's 100% okay. And if you reject that and that doesn't work for you, that's also okay. It just means you're not my people.
Yeah. But that's hard to get to,
Yeah.
right? If you're a recovering people pleaser. And
Come on, it's Gen X, like, we were all people pleasers, that's what we were bred for, it's
wait, I'm curious on that theory. Why Gen X? Because I'm like,
Huh?
I'm people in Gen X that are not people.
I think it's a mixed bag, and I can't I don't think we can really put it to I just like saying Gen X because it sounds good, because nobody talks about us, so,
Yeah.
it's
Well, they feel like the middle child. You're like, it's totally
well,
just
I'm that too, so but it's nobody
well,
talks about Gen X, but no, when you think back on it, it's we're supposed to be in cubicles doing jobs, put your head down, do what you're supposed to do, what I tell you to do, follow my blueprint. This is what I did. You should be doing exactly what we did to be successful in life or to have anything, because that's what worked for me. But that's also where we miss skills. We don't acquire the skills necessary that the adults in your life may or may not have, because they don't have it to give to you. And so then you're 20, 30, 40, 50 years old, still struggling to acquire some of these skills to help you navigate life a little bit better. And again, it just goes back to that awareness.
I think we also so there's the cultural aspect, right? There's so many different pieces
There
to it.
is.
There's
Yeah.
like that big cultural piece. There's like your own family system and like what role you played. And so like for me, it's there's a lot of things that impact me on this level. And then it's also getting even like more impactful the more that we get to the family of origin. And I know that the people pleaser part of me was definitely a protector part I developed as a kid. And I never let that part retire. I was like, let's keep going until it was like, actually, this is really wrecking my own ability to connect with people genuinely because it wasn't
Right.
like real. It was what I was getting out of it and how I was navigating and controlling my life. and just the ways that it kept me from actually being myself. I wasn't able to do the things in my life I wanted to do and take even what I was choosing as far as a college and career options and how I was doing things was people don't realize how that's subtly playing in the background, like that's
Right.
and then that's like moving you to places. And so it's funny as I know people are like, let's not talk about my childhood. It's such a cliche. And I'm
Got to start somewhere.
like right here. I'm like, let me know when you want to talk about the elephant in the room. They're like, let's
Yeah.
not talk about it. I'm like, cool, we'll go over here for a second until the elephant's like sitting in your lap. And this is how I am showing up and
Yeah.
all
And
that
you
good
don't
stuff.
realize how inauthentic you're actually being. And so people are constantly trying to connect with you in their own way, the way that they learn to connect with others. But again, there's this wall, there's this barrier, there's this I'm just nice, I'm going to be nice all the time and you never show up as your full self. So
Yeah.
then you question, how can you like me because you don't even know me and I don't even really know myself to be honest with you. And then that creates some of these other relationship behaviors that people really struggle with uh, on my platform.
Oh, 100%. You never actually feel connected to people or like you belong or you're truly your people. Not able to actually show them all those other parts of you that are not whatever you're curating for them. And like you said, like doing that for so long, or I'll speak for myself. I had to really figure out who I was again because I've been in that role for so long. I was like, who is Jenny? What does Jenny want? Because I don't even know. I'm always like,
Yeah.
Jenny
What is
is
Jenny like?
what what coffee do I like? It was like literally
I don't care, whatever you want.
whatever. It's not what would be easiest for you to make. It just obviously that's an extreme, but I didn't realize how much that part of me that was like hyper vigilant about the surroundings and how I could manage it based on what I said and did. That was what was me. It wasn't actually what I want. And getting into a space to ask those questions to myself again, it felt really weird at first. Felt really weird. Like when I don't know if you experience that. When you ask people to do that, they're just like, like, how do I like and so I feel like it's even
What do you mean? What do I want? I don't know.
I want people to be happy.
Yeah, just tell me what to do, I'll do it. Like, God, why is that
Why
so hard? Why is that so hard for you? Just tell me what to do, I'll do it.
tell me what I want.
Yeah. No, it's so interesting. But then when you really start leading yourself, and again, it's a skill, you begin to lead yourself in a different way. You separate yourself from the things that have always plagued you and have been difficult to navigate, or at least you have an acknowledgement that these two things can exist at the same time and that you can just question it and say, yeah, you know what? You settle down. I don't need this anymore. I'm actually stepping into this different version of me that doesn't tolerate bad behavior and doesn't tolerate the things that upset me or activate me. And it's okay to do that. It's actually necessary.
Yeah. And to just and to plan for people to be unhappy as you evolve and to
Yeah.
try to keep you stuck and maybe even call you selfish or other things. I feel like that's the word I hear a lot from people is I'm scared of being selfish once they start to actually do things for themselves and set boundaries with people. Because yeah, people that are not good at respecting boundaries, they will come up with all sorts of words and ways to describe you and make it about you that they don't want to respect your boundary.
Yeah. I always tell people self love isn't selfish. Sitting in your mess is. Because what you don't realize is when you're not working on you, when you're not putting the work into yourself, when you're not growing, developing, changing, expanding, you're not giving your full potential to all the other people in your life. And so they don't get to experience that version of you. But when you start showing up for yourself, when you make yourself a priority, when you step into that role, now you're giving other people around you permission to do the exact same thing
Yeah.
because they see that in you and they're like, wow, I didn't realize that was possible. It starts with rejection, right? They're going to reject you at first, but then as time goes on, like we said with the followers, over time, you begin to move into this other space. And then there's evidence for the things that you've created and the things that you've done. And then you can't refute that evidence because it's right in front of you. And then they're like, okay, how they'll start asking you, how did you get here? What did you do? And they want to know your story and try to figure that out for themselves as well.
Yeah. I think it's interesting too, because sometimes it's unfortunate, but for me, even I think what was really motivating at first was realizing as I grew, that would help other people. So it was like still that people pleaser part in a weird way. Like I eventually outgrew that part of it, but it is true that when you do your own self work, you are going to impact those other people. And even if they're pissed off at you, I think about it as, when somebody struggles with alcoholism, they're not stoked when you call them out. Like they're not like,
Right.
yay, thank you for that feedback. Like typically they're pretty upset. But they also like, when I think of the people that have gone through their recovery journey with alcohol or eating disorders, or even my own, like the doctor that called me out when I was struggling with an eating disorder in high school, I was so sassy too. I was so sassy too. And she never knows to this day that when I do presentations on that, I thank her because I'm like, she had the courage to call me out, even though I was not kind about it. And that was like the person that enabled me to finally get a full assessment and stop. Like my family was in denial, so we kept going to doctors, like, "Why is she losing weight? It must be something else." And so, and to be fair, I was super sneaky. I call myself an honest liar. Like I didn't mean to be deceptive, but I was because that's how ill I was. And so, um, through that process of her sharing that with me, despite the fact that I was not nice about it, but she changed my life. And I think about that in the subtle ways that, like, when we don't let people continue to engage in the behaviors that are hurtful to other people, even on micro levels, like that gives them the opportunity to change and to fix that if they are in that part of their journey. And you might be like one of 10 people who I'd be like, hey, don't do that for them to actually see that. And you may never see that they actually eventually create change or whatever.
Right.
But you're still giving them the best chance. And so I don't think people realize it is kind to tell people to not treat you in ways that could be hurtful and not cool. Or even sometimes people set boundaries and you're like, I'm not being hurtful, but the whole concept is that you're trying to meet somebody where they're at. It doesn't matter if it doesn't make sense to you. It's to honor and meet them where they're at. Even if they're struggling to work through whatever that thing is, that they eventually are going to be like, yeah, I'm actually more okay with this thing now or whatever. But showing them that you like care, that you're like, I really hear
We did not talk about boundaries.
you. No, we
It's
didn't.
so
Not
funny.
as much as I thought we might, but that's okay. Like all this
Yeah.
stuff, it's all related in different ways because I think once we're on that journey, we do set boundaries, including boundaries with ourselves. Like when you talk about self
Right.
love, there's boundaries in there. But anyway,
How do we
yeah.
set a boundary with ourselves? What does that even look
Um,
like?
I think about all the different, so like when we're talking about self boundaries, it's the ways that we're no longer going to engage in things that we may have in the past. So for instance, like I used to be really hard on myself and just like shame myself and if I made a mistake or whatever. And so self, yeah. And it just like would just like ruminate or whatever. And so for me, it's not that I don't ever default to that because sometimes I still do, especially if it's something that is tender for me. But I now have a self boundary that I'm only going to do that one. Like I'm only going to go through one rotation. And then I'm going to like actually sit back and try to give myself grace and say, okay, what could I have done better in the future? And let me make this healthy guilt instead of shame. And that's the boundary I have with myself that I don't do that any longer. Oh, another one. This one, okay, it's interesting because I've gotten some flack about this one. So I'm like, I'm
Okay.
curious what you might think, your other listeners.
Yeah.
Um, I grew up with a lot of passive aggressive people in my life. And so part of my healing journey has been to not read between the lines. And so if somebody's upset with me and they're being like pouty and I'm like, my spidey senses are going off. Like sometimes it's not that I never ask like, hey, is something going on with you? But I stopped doing it. Like I set the boundary with myself because I used to again try to like rescue and save people. And now I'm like, what?
What you thinking?
Are you okay?
Are you okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, you know what? If they have something they need to say to me directly, that's on them. And I'm no longer going to read between the lines, fill that in, and try to go to them and make sure we're good because of their behavior. And I remember someone just being like, because one of the occasions they were like, I think your mom was upset about that thing. And I was like, maybe. If she's really upset, she'll probably tell me.
And she'll let me know.
Yeah. And it was funny because I don't even know who knows if my mom was actually upset about that thing or not. But I got to the point where I was like, you know what? It's not my job anymore. It is not my job to take up the energy and space to like have to figure that out and fix it and solve it. It's their job to come tell me directly. they're upset by something. I'm not just going to pick up. And it also enables, it's like it's a boundary for me, but it's a boundary for them too.
Yep.
Just like that, I'm not going to pick up on them. Like, it's not going to work. If that's the way you want to convey to me that you're not okay or you're unhappy about something, it doesn't work.
That evolution is so hard to get to because you have to have so much self-awareness of what you're going through, what you're experiencing, because you've been spending so much time trying to anticipate the other person. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? What's going on? How can I protect myself? We're in this place of I don't want you to abandon me. I don't want you to hurt me. I don't want to have this, negative experience. So I'm going to try to anticipate everything that could potentially happen ever in this life experience and then do the things that are going to keep you a happy person, right? And again, disconnecting from ourselves, I say this all the time. It's not your job to fix or change people just so you can like them, right? And we get there a lot of the times where we're like we blame other people for our own life experiences. I'm experiencing this because of you and not because of something that's actually internally happening with me. So building that self-awareness is really difficult to get to because it's what's safe. It's what we know. And not safe, right? But it's what we know. It's familiar. And so
Yeah,
we stick to that.
absolutely. Even when it's not
Yeah,
serving.
even when it's not. Yeah. I don't want to be here. I don't like this, but I know it.
But I know I'm gonna keep doing it, and it's I can laugh at it now because I have seen how I've done that to myself so many
Mhm.
times. So I'm like, "Why? Why are we still here? Or why are we like or even if I like blamed somebody for something and I'm like, that was actually maybe I had a maybe I wasn't 100% them." And it's just so funny as I feel like as people heal and deal and I don't know, I feel like thinking that self-love, but another word that kind of resonates with me is self-respect. Like
Yeah.
I've learned to respect myself a lot more the more that I've actually been able to own my stuff and see where I played a role. And also see where I'm over functioning. That's yeah, it's a journey. It's a
O-
journey.
Over functioning.
Yeah. So like when I do that thing where I'm trying to guess what they're feeling and being like, are you okay? And trying to like rescue or save somebody. Like to me, that's over functioning. Like a lot of people, a generic common example is that instead of setting a boundary with somebody around cleaning or who does what, somebody will just do it for them because they're like, I don't want to deal with the drama.
You bring up so many things that we could dive into. That's a very common one. Yeah.
And I'm like, that's a person over functioning to take on that role versus actually addressing the issue. And person. A lot of people pleasers over function because that's their way of controlling the environment, not creating friction.
Yeah, there's also distrust there. Right? I don't trust you to do things in this
Mhm.
household properly. You cleaned that toilet wrong. You used the wrong product. That's not how you're supposed to do it. It's I don't know. I've been cleaning toilets my entire life. It's like, how is this wrong? Please tell me. Please show me.
And letting that go too. Like, if that's the hill you're dying on, right? If someone's actually trying and you're still just like, not good enough, what is that really about?
Right.
Why does it have to be your way?
That's always the question, but it's we take it so personal when that happens, and it's now all of a sudden I'm bad. I'm a bad person because I didn't clean the toilet properly, and because we don't know how to communicate or navigate conflict, it escalates into this bigger thing, and it's just like, where was that really coming from in the other person, right? It's not about the toilet, it's about something else. What is that exactly? And people don't know how to get from the toilet to the conversation. They don't know how to get there.
No. Because it's hard and also it's also something that I'm still growing in this area of myself is like getting vulnerable when I'm upset and saying instead of going from that blame place of just being like, I feel scared that this means this. And that it's really my insecurity around this. And that's really what's coming up. And that's why this feels so big for me. Or that's why I'm so upset. And like really owning that it's about our stuff and our insecurities and our fears and keeping that real or being like, I really want to talk about this thing. And whether or not this is even realistic or I'm just projecting this onto you, I'm scared about how you're going to respond. And so I haven't talked to you about it yet, but I'd really like to, but I'm super nervous because that's very real and blah. But it's a lot harder to do that than to be like, this is why we can't talk about things because you're such a
Right.
jerk and just and blame somebody and be harsh to them versus to be real and be like, oh, I'm nervous. I'm scared. I'm scared this is not going to go well. And then we're not going to talk. And I'm going to miss you. And I'm like just saying all the things that are really hard to say.
Right.
That's really the heart of it. It's not that you're like it's more soft often than not. And people don't know how to get to the soft parts. They get into that like angry, like, and they think that it's funny because I think a lot of people are like, this is my boundary. And I'm like, "Mm, I
Yeah.
don't know about that. I think that's your fear.
Right. Well,
That's your pain.
a lot of times that boundary is actually it's not a boundary. You're actually trying to limit or change the other person a lot of times in a fundamental way.
Yes.
So we get into relationships with somebody who might be a drinker and you're not a drinker. And that's a standard and value that you have that you're not that type of person. And there's no shame or anything on the other side if you are somebody who drinks, but that's a standard and value that you've now thrown out, you've cast out, you've ignored it. So you're self-abandoning, you're betraying your own values. And then we date this person. And then when negative things start to happen in that dynamic, we don't take any ownership or responsibility. It then becomes victim blaming because you made a decision to ignore all of these spidey senses and things that were going off in you and continue to date somebody, not something that goes against your standards and values. So that's why you hear me say all the time, what are your goals, values, and standards for a relationship with you? Can you acknowledge that, accept that, begin to honor that, and then understand what your boundaries are around that and know when to compromise on those things? Because nobody's perfect, no situation is perfect. There's going to be compromise, but the more that you can step into your goals, values, and standards, the stronger and more empowered you're going to feel in any given situation. And that first time you say no to something that's, but I want it, but it's not good for you. And there's all this evidence and reasons why you shouldn't have that particular thing or that relationship. The first time you say no to that is the hardest thing you'll ever do, but you'll never feel more empowered or safe in your own body than allowing yourself to do that.
Yeah. And that might not, like you said, it's hard to do. And I think though, at least in my experience, you don't feel great about it at first, typically. Like it doesn't at first. It feels like you look back on it and you're like, man, I feel so empowered now. But like at the
You
time,
might go directly to shame.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or just like second guessing yourself or like all these feelings start to come up that you're like, oh, that does not feel good. But then later on, you're like, that was the right call. And I think you're 100% right. I think that's part of why the people that are stuck in whatever keeps them from really knowing themselves can get into those relationships where they always feel like they're like, why do I always date the same person? Or it's not the same person, but I feel like, why are they in the cycle they're in? And I'm like, can't change that until you get to know yourself and say no and set those boundaries. But if you don't do that, you are just like the odds are you're just going to be in a relationship with people where your values clash. And if you can't communicate and you don't have coping skills, it's a beautiful disaster, right?
It
And it's
is.
and so it's just yeah. And people are like, "Why does this keep happening?" And I'm like, "It's a mystery."
So it starts like this. They're
Oh,
my type.
I feel butterfly,
Yeah,
right?
stop that. Get rid of your type. Your type doesn't matter. Your type is what has caused you a lot of heartache and problems and issues and other things over time. We need to start navigating away from that. And a lot of it's superficial anyway, at the end of the day. But
A lot of the butterfly stuff is superficial. I'll
uh,
speak. My butterfly stuff is totally superficial. Totally.
what's your butterfly stuff?
It's funny because okay, I was talking about this with somebody the other day. If you put a lineup of all the guys that I've dated physically, they do not look alike, like, at
Right.
all. They're different ethnicities, heights. I think the only not even that, like, I've dated guys that are not, like yeah, no, they look different. I think there's only, like, maybe some extremes that, like, they physically look different, but I guess my type or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. So, I think for me, unfortunately, what I've had to heal in some of the attachment wounds and even what I've had to heal with partners and then outside of partners and all that good stuff has been I've struggled with thinking that people who are safe are boring or they're not fun enough. And so that's been part of my journey is healing that if they're
It's
super
huge.
safe
Yeah.
and not like finding like the fights or whatever as like part of that like love and whatever. Like I've had to really heal that and heal that within myself help too, and
Yeah.
acknowledge when I'm pushing away from somebody because it's part of that. But that was just, I think that's when I say like my type, like I've done the thing where I'm like, oh, I just don't, it's not exciting enough or I don't feel butterflies enough. And it typically that is with somebody who might be safer. And that's part of what I've rejected in the past. I'm like, that's so superficial. And at some
Yeah.
point, you get 6 months into a relationship, a year in, and you realize how much like all the other stuff really matters. And even like one of the healthiest guys that I've dated, I remember just being like, this guy's weird. I remember just about him to my friends and family. This guy is like, he was the crazy one, but truly it was
That's
me.
funny.
I'm willing to acknowledge that. Like to this day, I look back on that relationship and I was like, because I broke up with him.
Mhm.
And I look back and I was like, that was me being like, not healthy enough in that process. And I've been able to grieve that and go through that process, but I had to actually acknowledge that. Like, I broke up with him and he was a healthy one.
That's where we use the term ick. That's one
Mhm.
of my favorite terms when people use the ick. "Oh, he just gives me the ick." And it's, does he though? Or is he just a normal person that you have to find something wrong with because it's not what your nervous system is looking for? You're not attuned to that type of person. I don't know why we have to put people down. It's just you just have to recognize I'm not attuned to you. And yeah, so I think these things are chemistry. I need to be turned on by something. And whatever you're doing, whether it's your board shorts or whatever it is, the haircut, the mustache, whatever it is for you that gives that ick. It's just it's always interesting to me to hear that from other people because that's where you're limiting yourself a lot.
Yeah.
Whenever I and there was somebody on social media that like captured all these different icks and it was popping up on TikTok every now and again. I thought it was fantastic because they're hilarious. It's the most ridiculous things. Like, how is that an ick? It's just a person being a person. They're just living their life. They're sipping their coffee. I don't like the way you sip your coffee. Ew. Like,
Like that.
okay.
Feeling it.
Yeah, I guess I'll
Well,
change the way I sip my coffee. I don't know.
or like I have a colleague that has shared that she will not a date or she probably at this point has had to get past this, but she's like, yeah, I don't date guys who wear flip flops. And I was like, interesting. So how did you like, it's like in the summertime, you're like, keep that covered.
So I've heard that before. I don't want to see your feet. I get it. Feet are ugly. I'm not the person that's going to be like feet
Wrong
picked.
with me?
Yeah. So I can see that, but at the same time, it's just what's wrong with that? Let people be people. They want to wear
Yeah.
flip flops. Find it
Right.
endearing. I always get to this place with my clients where it's you have to start with a gratitude list about your partner. Gratitude list daily is extremely helpful. We get to this place where it's really hard to I'm thankful for air. Yeah, great, we get that. It gets redundant over time, but you have to look at your partner and really begin to identify what do I appreciate about this person? What do they do right? And even when they're doing something wrong, can I recognize that as something that's endearing and it's not necessarily wrong or incorrect? It's just a part of their process and how they operate, the way they think, the way they feel and can you begin to admire those things about the other person? And are you a collaborator or not? And that's for me what relationships are. You're in a collaboration, we're co creating. We use the language of a shared mission and vision 1 year, 3 year, 5 year. You got to have it, even a 10-year plan. But we have to start using that language of a shared mission and vision, or you're going nowhere. You're going to struggle in your relationships if you don't know where you're going, what you're doing, or why you're doing it.
100%. And I really appreciate Mark Manson talks a lot about how love is not enough. And I really appreciate the ways that he has given language to that. Like he's an incredible writer. He has an incredible way of speaking things. And he talks a lot about how shared values, respect,
Yeah.
trust, like those are the foundation. It's not about love. And I see that not only in our intimate relationships, but also like our family relationship. And that gets hard for people too, right? Like that idea that they could be your family, but if they are not respectful, loving, you guys don't have a shared vision. That's especially around the holidays. I think that is what gets really tricky. People start
Yeah.
to stick with families and that weird friction of feeling like they're my family. I've got to do X, Y, and Z and participate in X, Y, and Z.
Thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. Do tell us you have a book. You've got the 12 days of slaying boundaries along
Yeah.
with a giveaway. You have an online course that comes with a closed group and you had a podcast, but what happened to it?
Um, got super busy. So like sidebar, I also own like the largest group practice in Canvas. So I'm a busy lady.
You are.
I love doing what I do. I do. I did not know I would fall so much in love with the business side of things, but I have. And being on that side of things and in leadership, I had to find some sort of balance. So for me, like the group coaching is how I still am able to like connect with people and feel like I'm more connected with clients. I only see 1 or 2 clients a week now as far as a therapist. And so the group coaching gives me a little bit more like connection to that world. And in addition to we have like therapist meetings too, where I'm like, let me live vicariously through y'all and also learn and grow.
Right.
So I do on that. But yeah, I wrote a book about a year and a half ago. And it's funny, like at some point I'm like, maybe I'll revamp it or do something different. But I do have a book that I took a lot of time on and that I think is really great too. Obviously I'm biased. I wrote it myself,
Well,
but
I love the title of it. That's accurate. It was a good title.
yeah, thank you. Beneath your bullshit, but I called it BS because I try to connect with those people. I see again.
You can't swear.
I know
Yeah.
I'm still healing from that people pleaser part of me because I remember spending hours thinking about bullshit. Should I like how
I can't say bullshit. I can't do that.
you grew up with an LDS family, okay?
Everybody's gonna reject me.
The funniest part is my mom is like one of the most like accepting people now, and so like I could curse around her and she's gonna be fine. Like it's fine. But it's my own. It's that story I'm stuck in. Like it's
Right.
my own narrative. But yeah, anyway, so I have all these things. But I think if people want to follow along the work I do, Instagram, TikTok at Jenny Ann Helms. I've got some free resources too, because I know a lot of people are like, where do I start? And I have a list of boundary examples. And that's a good just resource of like, how do we put words to this? And the 12 days of boundaries, I'm going to go through what boundaries are, why people suck at them. Because let's be real, as we start to use process, people typically really struggle to either overcorrect, undercorrect,
Yeah.
all those different pieces. How to do boundaries with consequences versus threats, because boundaries without like legitimate, real like consequences or that are truly within our control are not really boundaries. They're
Yeah.
just being like,
Stop using threats, guys.
yeah, stop threatening people. I did it for a long time though. And I was like, man, I'm so boundaried. But really, it's just
Or else.
threatening people. Yeah, no, it's funny learning that even on my own journey. I was like,
Yeah.
man, I thought I had this figured out, but I totally didn't.
My way
Um,
or the highway. Get out.
or I'll just ignore you and be passive aggressive. Yeah, let's
Yeah.
not,
It
that's not the solution. I'll tell you that. But yeah, I go through all this different pieces, what healthy consequences look like, and then just some actual holiday examples, all that good stuff. Cause it is that time of year where
it
people
is.
get weird and we become one of my professors. He said, this time of year, everybody shrinks a few inches when they go back to see family. And I was
Yeah.
like, man, I don't have a lot of inches to shrink. You
Right?
figure but no, it's true, like, we all revert back in some, like, small ways, and so it's funny, every year I go back for Christmas, and then in January, I'm, like, processing with my therapist. I'm like, "So here's how I shrunk.
No.
Here's what I work on next time." So anyway, just keeping it real that, like, we could all use some ideas, encouragement, and support. Correct.
I love it. You guys, if you haven't already followed Jenny, you're going to after this episode. So make sure you go and do that. Go out and get her book and check out the 12 days of slaying boundaries. I love the pun.
Creating boundaries,
Yeah.
yes, and trying to get real hip with the kids.
Hey, you do what you got to do.
Awesome, it was great to be with you, Jason. We'll have to do this again.
Yeah, we will.